So welcome to Inspire's mindfulness session. My name's Frank, and I normally describe myself as my name's Frank and I'm a recovering thinker. A recovering thinker, yes, because sometimes, just sometimes, we find ourselves becoming addicted to our thinking. With mindfulness practice, what we find is that we're able then to bring the mind home. We start to come to our senses: sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, but most of all, it's about being in the cut. I'm often asked about, why did I get involved in mindfulness practice? And looking way back in sort of the history of time for me now, I always wanted to be someone else, somewhere else, doing something else, anywhere else but here, right now. I was always uncomfortable in my own skin. There's a great poet called Derek Walcott, and Derek Walcott, if you bear with me, wrote a fantastic poem, and I think this poem really captures mindfulness. The poem is called Love After Love, and it goes like this. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile at others' welcome and say, sit here and eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another. Take down the love letters on the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit and feast on your life. I love that poem. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door in your own mirror, and each will smile, not frown, but smile at others' welcome and say, sit here and eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another. Take down the love letters on the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit and feast on your life. What I hope to do within the next 25 minutes is to introduce you to simple mindfulness practices that allows us to bring the mind home, that allows, enables and empowers us to be present right here, right now. I know that if I was walking down Royal Avenue and someone was walking behind me telling me the things that I tell me, I'd phone for the police and get them lifted. Through mindfulness practice, what we discover is that harsh, critical, internal voice, that sort of internal saboteur, tends to become softer, kinder, gentler. Because what happens through mindfulness practice is we're then able to join the dots. We're able then to come to our senses. We're able to be aware. We're able then to wake up. To wake up at what I would describe as autopilot. You know autopilot? When you're going from A to E and you don't see B, C or D. You just get into the car and the next thing you know, you're at your destination. Through mindfulness practice, what we discover A, B, C, D and E. So I hope to take you through A, B, C, D and E, a short journey, a lightning tour of mindfulness practice within this session. I was told by a great guy called Professor James Doty, who's based in Stanford University, that he talked about what I would describe as the handy model of the brain. The handy model of the brain, of which I just have under the chair right here, connected to my wrist. So here we have the handy model of the brain. We have the lower brain, we have what's called the fight, the flight, the freeze and the collapse, and we have the upper brain. We have the cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and what's known as the executive function. What Doty says if there was a war between the lower brain and the lower brain would win. Yep. And what we know now through neuroscience is that these two guys here, the amygdala twins, right? Amygdala, which is a Greek word for almond, it's about the size of an almond, that what happens is that these wee guys are always panicking, always on the alert, always ready to set off fight, flight, freeze or collapse. What we know through mindfulness practice is that if there's a war between the lower brain and the upper brain, yes, the lower brain would win, but now through practice, neuroscientists have discovered that through our practice, that the cortex becomes denser and denser and denser and denser. And in doing so, guess what? We don't flip the lid. Now, whenever I say we don't flip the lid, it doesn't mean to say that we're going to be stress-free. Of course, there's a certain amount of stress in our lives, but what happens is, if you can imagine that there's two guys in the car. This guy's a practitioner, this is a non-practitioner, and we're going along, and a car cuts out in front of us. And guess what? Both of us flip the lid. Yeah? But this guy here, the practitioner, will recover faster. Yeah? Whereas this guy here will continue then to perseverate. This could have happened, that could have happened, we could have been written off, we could have been killed, this happened to a friend of mine, and on and on and on and on and on. Where, as you notice, this guy here is recovered. We now know that through mindfulness practice, these wee guys here, the amygdala, begins to shrink. And then the shrinking of the amygdala strengthens then the cortex, and guess what? Yes, we don't flip the lid. So how do we do this? I'd like to introduce you to maybe just 2 or 3 simple exercises that you can do at home. The first exercise, what I'd like you to do is, I would like you just to take a moment, just to drop into your body, to sense your body, to connect with your body. Your eyes closed or open, half closed or half open. Now, just bring your attention, your awareness, to your breath. Notice how you breathe. Notice the quality of your breath. No right way, no wrong way, no effort. See if you can notice where your in-breath begins, and track your in-breath to where the in-breath ends. Now notice where your out-breath begins, and track your out-breath to where your out-breath ends. Like a wave rolling into the shore and returning to the ocean, sensing the ebb and flow of your breath. No effort, no adjustment. And if you find your mind wandering off, notice and gently return to your breath. I thank you very much. What we're going to do now is, we're going to look at our attention. At the beginning of that exercise, I asked just to notice where your attention is. Mindfulness practice is a wee bit like Couch to 5K. What happens through our practice is we start to work what I would describe as the mindful muscle. You know, sometimes we have like the tail wagging the dog. Yeah. But through our practice then what happens is we find ourselves taming the dog. So it really comes down to where is your attention right here, right now. So there's a few things that we can do, and the first one I'd like to introduce you to would be just take a moment, just a moment, to connect with your seat. Sense your seat. And as you connect with your seat, notice the atmosphere in the room, the temperature of the room. Now gently bring your attention, your awareness to sound. Aware of sound without judging or analyzing or interpreting. Sounds appear and fade away. Your attention wanders, notice and gently return to sound. Now what we find through that simple exercise is we're starting now to connect with our body, sensing the floor beneath our feet, noticing contact with our seat. I would say a good exercise that we can all use day in, day out, which allows us to connect the breath with the body, would be a simple exercise which I call the task at hand. I don't know if you ever remember the great story, The Wizard of Oz. Well, my sort of take on The Wizard of Oz is, instead of taking leave of our senses, like poor Dorothy, what happens is we're able then to bring our mind home, to connect to our senses. Do you remember whenever Dorothy arrived and seen the great wizard? She had the power within her feet. Yeah? Clicked her heels, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. So through our practice, and what we discover that we're able then to bring the mind home. Here I am sitting in the chair in this beautiful office, feet on the floor, butt on the seat. But you know what? My head could be elsewhere. I could be time traveling off to the future, or I could be ruminating about the past. Our mindfulness practice has a way of bringing the mind home to be present right here, right now. So here's a simple exercise which I think is a way for us to connect the breath with the body. For this exercise, I'm going to introduce the bell. So what will happen is I'll invite the bell to sound, and the bell will be the timekeeper. This exercise lasts for about 1 minute. Yeah? And what I'd like you to do for the minute is, I would like you to do the following. If you take the finger of one hand, I'd like you to trace the fingers of the other hand to the speed of your breath. Like so. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. So on and so forth. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. Allow your breath to determine the speed of the finger. If you're breathing fast, that's okay. If you're breathing slow, that's okay. All you have to do is count your breaths. So as you breathe in and you breathe out, that's 1. Breathe in, breathe out, that's 2. Breathe in, breathe out, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Yep. I suggest that we do this with our eyes closed, because sometimes we think, we judge we're doing it right or we're doing it wrong, we're doing it fast or we're doing it slow. Yep. So for the next minute, what I would like you to do, I'll look after the time with the sound of the bell. I'll count you in 3, 2, 1, and all you have to do is to count your breaths. Okay, let's give it a go. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. So that beautiful exercise, which I call the task at hand, what we find is, as we continue to practice, that the breath and the body connect, and the breath begins to slow down. What we also notice is we start to notice that our attention, and I'm sure you found yourself, is that your attention was focused at the task at hand. We weren't thinking about the future or ruminating about the past. So as a gift from Inspire, I would suggest that you really put this practice into, as many times as you want in a day. And for me, a bit like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, in bringing the mind home, we start to connect with our senses, the breath and the body. So here we are, Mental Health Awareness Week. Lots of stresses and strains taking place all around us, in our daily lives, and friends around us and throughout the world. But what I find with mindfulness practice is sometimes it's about the struggle within ourselves. Sometimes, at the beginning I said my name's Frank and I'm a recovering thinker. Sometimes what happens is we become addicted to our thinking. Through our practice, what we discover is thoughts are thoughts, they're not the mind. The same way as clouds are clouds, they're not the sky. Go up in a plane, through the clouds, you've got a clear blue sky. Through our mindfulness practice, what we discover is we're not our thoughts. Thoughts appear and they fade away. A bit like sound. Sound appears and then guess what? It fades away. And then another sound appears and then it fades away. The great sort of teacher of mindfulness practice, I would say the guru of the West, who's brought it into what's called the third wave in psychology, is a guy called Jon Kabat-Zinn. And Jon Kabat-Zinn says that mindfulness practice is a particular way of paying attention to what's happening right here, right now, in a non-judgmental way. So then through our practice, what we discover is thoughts appear and they fade away. I think it was Shakespeare who said, things are neither right nor wrong, but it's thinking that makes them so. So through our practice, we discover this non-judgmental awareness that what's happening now is what's happening now, right here, right now. And then what happens, a bit like what the poet says in that beautiful poem, Love After Love, is that Frankie meets Frankie. We start to bring the mind home. We start to wake up to this moment that's never happened before. A good friend of mine in San Francisco told me back in 1992 that I had two lives. And of course, being from Belfast, I wanted to know, when do I get my second life? He told me you get your second life when you realize you've only one, that this is it. So through our practice, daily practice, and through the programs that Inspire offer, what we find is mental well-being. You know that sort of couch to 5K, we go out there, we do the couch to 5K, and the next thing is one day, we're running 5K. Through the practices, what we discover is we're starting to work that mindful muscle. We're bringing the mind home, and we become comfortable in our own skin. So we're coming to the end of this session. A big thank you for listening, and I hope you're able then to put this into practice. And for further information, feel free to contact Inspire in Lombard Street, Belfast. So here's wishing you good mental health.